Hi folks, Mr. Long here. We're going to look at a screencast here where we solve fractional equations. First thing I want to do though before we get started is to give you an idea of what it means for an equation to be fractional. So let's look at this one right here, folks. This one right here says x over 4 equals 3. Well, what is x over 4? That x, if we let x be a full box, for example, and we know it's broken into 4 parts, right? Our denominator, that's how many parts are in a whole. So it's x over 4. So we have x parts over 4, and that weighs 3. So what I need to do is to say that, okay, well, let's make a box here with 4 parts that are all the same. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I know that 1/4, or x over 4, right? X divided 4 ways is 3. So if that part is 3, then each successive part out here has to be 3. So I now have 4 groups of 3, which will be 12. So a whole weighs 12. What does that look like with algebra? Well, x over 4 equals 3. What's being done to x? X is being divided by 4. What's the opposite of dividing by 4? The inverse operation is to multiply by 4. But what you do on one side, you have to do on the other. Then this says 4. If we read this, this says 4 times x divided by 4. Well, 4 times anything divided by 4 is going to be, that's 4x divided 4 ways, which gives us 1x. And over here I have 3 times 4 is 12. So x, in fact, does equal 12. Okay, let's look at a situation that's a little more complicated. So over here I have 3/5 of x. So I know my box is divided up into 3 to 5 parts in total. I've got 3 of them that weigh 6, and I have to figure out what a whole one weighs. So let's see. I've got 5 parts. So I've got to make a box with 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I know that these 3 here weigh a total of 6. So if 3 parts weigh 6, that means it's 2, 2, and 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then these other 2 are also going to be 2. So altogether, the weight of a full box is 10. X equals 10. But how do you do that with algebra? 3/5 x equals 6. Well, the first thing I have to do is I can multiply. If you look at this, what's being done to x? It's actually not a bad thing at all. X is being multiplied by 3, but divided by 5. The opposite of multiplying by 3 is to divide by 3. The opposite of dividing by 5 is to multiply by 5. So I do that. 5 over 3, 5 over 3. And that's 5 over 5, 3 over 3. That works out to 1x. And then I would just use my calculator. 6 times 5, which is 30, divided by 3 is 10. So 1x is worth 10. Okay, folks, so that's how you work with the simple fractions. What we're going to do is go to the next page and look at solving fractional equations. So here we go. Solving fractional equations. We've got a couple examples here from your handout. So from set 1, which are the simpler fractions, we have this equation, x divided into 10 parts, take away 13 is 36. Now a lot of the properties, or all properties of solving equations, apply to fractions, to equations with fractions. It's no different. We apply what are called inverse operations. So if you look at this, I'm taking away 13. What's the opposite of that? Well, I need to add 13 to both sides, right? And I do that, so I end up with that being gone. Negative 13 plus 13 is 0. So I have x over 10 equals 36 plus 13 is 49. Now what's the next inverse operation of this? I've got an x that is divided into 10 parts. So I've got this x here is being divided into 10 parts. What's the opposite of dividing by 10? It's multiplying by 10. And then I have 10x's divided by 10, which is going to be 1x. 49 times 10 is 490. So just to review that, I look at my equation and I remember that I'm going to have to isolate for x. But before I isolate for x, I have to eliminate that negative 13. What's the opposite of negative 13? Positive 13. But I can't just add 13 to one side of the equation. I have to do it to both to keep it balanced. So I add 13 to both sides, and negative 13 plus 13 is gone. I add 36 plus 13 to get 49. I then notice that my x is being divided into 10 parts. The opposite of divide by 10 is to multiply by 10. But I have to do what I do to one side, I have to do to the other to keep it balanced. So I end up with 10x divided in 10 different ways. Well, 10x divided 10 ways is just 1x, which is what I want. And then I do 49 times 10 to get my 490. Alright, well, let's try this one. Let's try the example from set 2 with the more complex fraction. So I notice that I've got a positive 19 here on the same side as 46x, so I have to eliminate that. The opposite of plus 19 is minus 19, but I have to do that to both sides. So now I have 4, 6 of x. The 19 is gone, plus 19 minus 19 makes 0. Then 23 minus 19 is 4. And now I look at what I'm doing to x. So what am I doing to x? I'm multiplying it by 4 and dividing it by 6. Multiplying by 4, dividing by 6. Well, what's the opposite of that? Well, I would say it's to multiply by 6 and divide by 4. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So 6 times 4 is 24. 4 times 6 is 24. 24x's divided 24 ways gives us 1x. And then I have 4 times 6 is 24. Divided by 4 is 6. So 1x is worth 6. Okay, so what you should do now is to review this. You might have to go back over and go through the video again to make sure you understand it. But you should review the video if you need to, and then complete all the rest of the questions from the solving fractional equations worksheet. And if you try that and you get through some of them but not all of them, make sure you get in for extra help. But please watch this video again if you need any help.